Today on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories, I'm honoured to have Eamonn Quinn. Eamonn used to be the Deputy Chairman of Superquinn, which now became Super Value, which for those of you outside of Ireland is one of the leading brands in terms of supermarkets that we have here. On top of that, Eamonn is also the Chairman of Celsius, which is a food safety company. And on top of that, he does a lot of philanthropy and charity work. And I have to say, he also does a bit of mentoring, which I have been the honour of having a little bit of mentoring myself, and he really is a superstar in terms of helping others. Eamonn, welcome to the show.
Thank you for that introduction.
Not at all. Well, we've known each other for a while. We first met, I think it was back in 2018 at the All Ireland Business Conference, when I had the honour of interviewing you and the other guys from Dragons Den, because you were obviously on Dragons Den in RTE as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And and then since then we've been friends. I've seen you do your fantastic photography on Hoath Head many times, which I have to say, if anybody hasn't seen his photography, go online, look on Facebook and Instagram, it's phenomenal. And I know, obviously, I'd love to go right back to when you first started out as a young boy as such. Obviously, your dad started up Superquinn, and it's grown massively now. What was it like around the Quinn family table for dinner? Was it all entrepreneurship chat, or was there fun and games?
I'd say a combination of both. I suppose what's normal to you, is probably not normal to somebody else. But I mean, Dad would talk about business, but he would more throw kind of problems at you, and sort of say, "What would you do in this situation?" or "This happened, and how would you solve it?" So he would often throw stuff at us, and we'd have to come up with a thing, and then we'd say, "Well, what did you do?" And he'd say, "No, I didn't do that. I did this." And so you were learning without knowing you were learning, really. In the business of so many people, there were so many characters, customers, issues like that. What happens when one of your best customers is shoplifting, and how do you approach them when they're married to the doctor or something like that, and all the social issues with that, and you go, "Oh, I don't know, what did you do?"
And would you say, I mean, I know your dad obviously has passed away, but he always had a massive reputation of being a super guy. Do you think he was one of your key models in your life in terms of business?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, I suppose it was a huge influence because, you became aware, probably from early teens that, you were part of a successful business, and, people were pointed out. So it was, "Oh, you're Fergal Quinn's son," and you realised, "Oh, that definitely changes things." So I probably spent most of my life trying not to be Fergal Quinn's son, and not telling anybody, because people would change sometimes when they found that out.
Yeah, and you went in obviously to the family business. I think it was back in 84 or 86 or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I finished college, but during the summertime I would have worked in the business. I worked in the bakery, worked in the butchers, you name it, worked in there. And then actually something that he suggested that people, it wasn't that you have to come into the business as soon as you finish. It was like you should go off do something else, and then you if you want to come in, then you'd add some value. So I went off and worked in the finance industry, and was a equity analyst for AIIB, which doesn't exist anymore, and did about 2 years wandering around interviewing CFOs of different businesses and writing up reports about them. So it was a fascinating thing, interviewing all of these different. I was just fresh out of college, 23, 24, interviewing the senior people in Irish industry. So that was pretty interesting.
And it's interesting that we have that similarity in terms of the finance background. And then obviously working in the business, I'm sure you had lots of different jobs. I know your last one was deputy chairman, and marketing director as well. But of those jobs that you went through, I'm sure there's lots of different ones along the way. What did you enjoy most about the business, and what job did you enjoy the most?
Well, you see, a family business, your kind of name is a brand. Your name is the brand. So it's you end up doing all you're kind of really not just doing one job, because everything you do in a family business, and we'd, just before we sold it, we'd nearly 5,000 employees. Mm-hmm. So, even, what you do in a store or how you're with people is sending a message somewhere. Mm. So it's I enjoyed the marketing side. I think the one bit I wouldn't have enjoyed was HR. dealing with the unions. It was like, I just found that, because I ended up, I think, as head of HR at one point when somebody left. It's like, oh, they've left, you're HR now. It's like, oh God, what cases are we involved in and whatever. But no, I mean, I enjoyed the whole thing. I think the job, I suppose, opening new stores and deciding where the future, where the business was going is probably what got me more energized. So, okay, we have a new store, what concepts are we putting in, what do we think is going to be, the appeal for the future. So I would have probably spent most of my headspace probably doing that, just the kind of routine stuff.
And obviously you went in to do the financial stuff just for a few years, but if there was something else now that you might have done instead of the family business, what do you think that would have been?
I don't know really, because my mother says I would have been a vet. I was very good with animals.
Very good.
And her father was a vet, or not her father, her grandparents were vets. So she said, you'd have been a great vet. But I did economics and mathematics, so probably sort of something mathsy, probably.
Yeah.
I was probably, I mean, I was more of an introvert, as I said, growing up, with the famous father in Dublin. You sort of, under the radar, you didn't really want to be standing out. Maybe some people take a different approach. So, but then when I made a decision to come into the business, you kind of had to be an extrovert, really, and I suppose the fact that I was shoved on TV and doing interviews, probably you got over that fairly quickly. I think the first time, and particularly in the supermarket business, it's really easy to find out what others are doing. If you want to go to Europe, you just walk into a store and you see, oh, they're doing that, I wonder what we can do. So we were networked with a big European organisation, and I think after the second conference they said, oh great, we'd love to hear about Superquinn, will you make a speech? And I was like, oh Christ. I think I'd done the reading at Mass once or twice, and that was it. So down to car communications, and I assumed that they would just hand me the speech, paying them good money and give me the speech which I'd be able to read out at the conference. I said, no, that's not how it works at all. It has to come from you, and they explained how you have to tell a story and you have to do all the bits, and then they help you with it. And actually that one session really kind of got me over it and realized, oh, that's how you do it. And but it was very easy in the supermarket industry to make a speech. You just would literally walk around the store and you could, as a customer, you could say, well, here's what we're doing here, here's what we're doing there, and people can relate to it. And sure, if you're a chip manufacturer, it's probably not as easy to explain. The process of the making the chips is probably not as interesting, or people can't relate to it as well.
And I have to say, as a kid, I don't really remember any other mainstream successful supermarkets as Superquinn. What do you think was the kind of the secret to your success? Was it people or just strategy? What was that secret?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it was really, I suppose, it was a very competitive business, and you had it was Quinn Supermarket originally till the 1970s, and then there was John Quinn who was running H. Williams, which doesn't exist anymore, and there was Pat Quinn who had opened Quinnsworth. And so there's a bit of Quinnsworth, Quinns, and so then that's how Superquinn emerged. And then to try and differentiate yourself, and with Dunn's there, they were doing clothes, and I think there was an experiment where we were doing clothes, and then eventually we said, well, we're not as good at Dunn's as clothes, and Quinnsworth were doing other stuff, big pilot high, whatever. And we said, but actually fresh food, there's a gap in fresh food, and that's we kind of really focused on that. And how do we get better at fresh food, and how do you energize people to come up with new ideas, because you can't be the boss just deciding what to do. So I think that's where kind of culture is important in this. We talk about mission statements and stuff, and it can be a bit gobbledygook if you just produce a mission statement, stick it on a board, and it's 20 pages long, nobody reads it.
Yeah.
But I think the original mission statement was to be best at food in Dublin.
Okay.
And that was, I think that was my grandfather saying to my father, well, what is it you want to do in this business? And father had to go away and think, let me think about that. And he came back and said, I want to be best at food in Dublin. And so that was the mission statement for quite a while, and then it expanded a little bit to 2 sentences. A world-class company renowned for excellence in fresh food and customer service.
Yeah. So
food and customer service. So that really kind of was the cultural kind of glue that got the organization together. That's what we do. So somebody came up with an idea to do drapery. well, that's not really food in Dublin, that's not going to fly. So it kind of get people on message, so that people in the stores then said, well, actually this company's interested in food, so they would come up with new food ideas, and they'd have to percolate up and all that stuff. So
I love that. And in your career, obviously you would have learned a lot working with your dad and other people as well. What would you say is a mindset tip for other leaders, or some kind of leadership tip that you learned that really helped you in your role?
Yeah, I think listening is something that we just did as a business, and again, led by my father, I suppose, and the idea of customer panels. So in our business, learning what customers thought as opposed to what we thought was good for them. So just listening to customers is really important. So just listen to the marketplace, whether that's through research or to actually interviewing your customers, or if you're in a B2B business, obviously you're a little bit further away, but really understanding what people want. And I think that's true for all businesses. You're really, questioning, okay, that was right 2 years ago, is it still right now? Where's the market going? And particularly in the supermarket business, from the 80s to the 90s, with that whole trend towards prepared food, was moving that direction. You can be a little bit too early with it. You have to move at a pace that your consumers are going at. But I think that whole idea of just listening and picking up new things, because you always have to be introducing something new.
Yeah, I totally agree. And during your time, I'm sure there's ups and downs in all businesses, and with our own roles as well. Is there anything that stands out that you can remember that just went completely wrong and you had to learn from it? And what did you learn from it?
Oh yeah, like I think was it Roger Federer said, I spend most of my time losing. I only win 52% by tennis strokes. I heard this recently, but so most of and great golfers, most of our life is failure. Rory McIlroy has won, 5 majors now, but he's lost an awful lot of them. So, but it's still a phenomenal career. So you make a lot of mistakes if you're willing to try things. So I think if you have a culture that says, let's try it and see if it works. I remember doing something. It was educational thing. It was we did these videos that we're going to give away, and you got a great deal if you ordered 5,000 of them. So I said, you ever order 5,000 and we tell them, I think we sold 100 of them. As that great phrase, which is failure is an orphan. And so, or was it success has many fathers and failure is an orphan?
Absolutely.
So everyone was like, oh, it was him. He did it. He ordered them. So, yeah. What are we going to do with them? And they sat there for a year looking at me, and eventually, just get rid of them. I can't look at them anymore. Take the loss, take the hit. Because in the food business, the retail business, if it's not selling, it's not going to sell. Just get rid of it, move on. And so I do remember that. But yeah, I mean, lots of things you just have to you try things and they don't work, and you maybe say, well, what was it, or we tweak it a little bit, but at some point you have to say, right, that's it, it's not working, done. And I suppose the venture capital business is a bit like that as well. When you're starting new businesses, but you're one trick pony, and if it's not working, then you got to cut it.
Absolutely. And and I have to say, because even now I'm always at Superquinn, because there's one around the corner here, and in Raheny, and there's one over in Colester as well. And even when I go in there now, there's obviously a legacy that's been left, because even the security guard is the most friendly person you could possibly meet. He knows who I am, he comes up and says hello and all that kind of stuff. And it's just lovely, because obviously that's been implemented over a long period of time through the customer service. Is that one of the things you're the most proud of, or what would you say, looking back at the career while you're at Superquinn, what was the thing that you personally, it touched your heart the most, and you think, that's what I'm most proud of?
Yeah, I think it is the people, and the fact that people were proud to work there, I think, was really important. And the fact that you treated people well, and I think if you treat people well, then they're going to treat customers well. And you get the best out of people, I think, if they feel good about, if you're watching every kind of thing. And now, obviously, some people did get fired, if you're stealing or doing something like that. But by and large, 99% of people, want to come into work, want to do a good job. And I think if you can kind of support that, I think that's probably the best legacy that you can leave. And, I suppose you go to an area and, you think of 5,000 employees, there's those wages are supporting another, possibly 10, 15,000 children. And all that.
So it wasn't the sausages then?
No, sausages are good though, and they're still around actually. It is the one. I think it's the only product left that has a Superquinn name on it.
Well, I remember because I moved over to London, and I always remember my mum saying to anybody who came over, whether it be her dad or her mum or whatever, will you grab some Superquinn sausages and bring them over because they were that good, and they truly were. So,
yeah. So that idea started in Northside. Northside Shopping Centre and Northside. So it was a visit to a factory, a sausage factory in Germany by a group, and they had a shop at the end at the back of the factory, and people would queue up on a Saturday. So they'd open the shop and a huge queue because they were getting sausages from the sausage factory. And somebody came, well, what if we actually made sausages in store? Because there's always a suspicion about sausages, what was in them, and and by actually having them made in store. You could see the pork coming in, you could see the mixing thing, and then the whole, linking the sausages together was people would be fascinated watching it, and I think and so they knew the ingredients were fresh. It was pure, pure meat going in, and I think from our whatever we had at the time, 12 or 13 stores, I think we'd like 10 or 15% of the market in sausages in the country. So
wow,
it was huge. And we used to joke we would never be oversold. We would never allow anyone to charge more for sausages than us. We wanted to be the highest price.
Yeah,
because it was the highest quality.
Well, they were delicious. I remember them as a kid. We used to have them all the time. There's nothing else. There was nothing. And you obviously then what made your family sell up in the end? Because obviously it was a thriving.
Yeah, there was never intention to sell the business. It was I suppose part of the lifestyle. We enjoyed it. We had a great network of other businesses around the world, in the US and Europe, and we'd go over and exchange ideas. And what's the next thing happening was, we never suspected it was certainly on the card. I mean, we would have been approached, from time to time. Vince O'Darty, who's unfortunately passed away, our chairman. But he would say, I've been approached because he handled all the bank stuff and preferred to deal with customers in the business, and we'd say, well, I'm not interested. Oh, what were they offering anyway? So I know we're not interested, but I mean, and we literally weren't interested. I mean, in fact, I divert a little bit, but Tony O'Reilly, late Tony O'Reilly, when he was in Fitzwilton, came to house in the early 80s, and he wanted to merge Superquinn and, gosh, I can't even remember the name of the business. They owned a supermarket company up in the north. And Tony arrived in his Bentley into the house in the 80s. I hadn't even seen a Bentley. There's probably only one or two in the country at that stage. And Tony had to pitch his idea in front of all of us in the living room.
Wow.
And after Tony was even at those days, I was probably 18, 19, and he was a superstar in those days. But he had to pitch the idea of why the businesses would make sense to merge, and after he left, I said, well, do you think that was a good idea or not? And I was the eldest, so even the 12-year-old brother was there as well. He just said whether that was good or not, and we said it was a good idea because it was what they were doing was completely different to what we were doing, and it didn't happen. But so I mean that discussion had taken place. Sorry, I diverted from the question.
No.
Why did we sell? The reason we sold really was because you've heard retailers location, and if you put the store in the wrong place, you're going to get half your business from where you are. No matter how good or bad you are, even if you're a bad store, you're going to get business because you're there.
Yeah.
It's what makes the difference is that extra people that are willing to drive by another store to get to you that makes a difference. But basically the Celtic Tiger was booming, prices were going through the roof. M50 was being built, so these key sites. So if you like, we were in the suburbs around Dublin. This M50 was coming out, all the key junctions. There was going to be a shopping centre at each one, and the price of those were about 3 or 4 times the price that the stores that we would have bought were. So we were trying to do the numbers on them, and you suddenly put the multiple. We're going to pay 4 times more for the supermarket. How does it pay? But it doesn't. My grandchildren would still be paying for this.
Yeah.
So it became very clear that within 4 to 5 years, we were going to lose quite a chunk of business from these sites with these huge, big stores that were double the size on these motorways. And so if you can't buy a store, stores are going to get out of date. You're going to be in the wrong place, and you're going to then have to revamp the stores that are losing money, and you're going to lose more money.
Yeah,
put more money in to lose money.
Yeah.
So it just, from a business point of view, we kind of sat with it for about a year and said, this is a tsunami coming at us, and we had borrowed money to build some more stores. We had borrowed money to do distribution center, which was all getting up and running. So which is kind of makes sense to do. Certainly in a private business, you don't want to be making too much profits. You just get paid a load of tax on it. So we just felt this is not going to be good. As somebody would say, this is going to be rough. And so then there was an approach made, and so I think really from developers who were going to say, okay, we can take that site and we'll do X, Y, Z, and put a hotel and this and that and the other, intensified. So they could make the sums work. So I think it was at that point, that's where we kind of came to the realization. But it was really, what was the best thing for the business?
Yeah.
And the idea of being in a business that we were going to have to slowly downsize and, let people go, fire people, whatever it is, and be in that, really a nasty situation for a number of years. It wasn't something that we kind of relished. So anyway, as it happened, when we sold the business, and obviously got a very good price for it, a year later, the prices were still going up, and we're like, oh God, we sold too cheap. And then poof, the thing collapsed again. So it was people say it was timing, but I mean it wasn't timing because we want to make a lot of money out of it. It was timing because it just didn't seem to be right for the business. And retail, some of the sites like Swords and Lucan and some of those new sites, they were bought 10-15 years before they opened the site, because Dublin was expanding, suburbs were expanding, so we would buy a greenfield site and then put it to its planning permission. So that could take 5-10 years in some cases before you actually got the site built and before the houses built up to get there.
Yeah.
So the idea of losing all that, was tough.
Yeah. And since then, you've gone on to do lots of different things.
Yeah.
And chairman of various different boards, helping in terms of the Education Trust in the past with DCU, and helping in terms of food recycling, and then Celsius as well. And obviously, one of my favourites obviously is the RTE Dragons Den as well.
Yeah.
How did you get into that, and what did you learn and enjoy about that as well?
I was at some meeting, I think it was this HBAN, which is this business entrepreneurship group, and they were looking for somebody, they approached them, I think, and they were looking for somebody to who had a food background, because they had only tech people, and there's a lot of the new business where food businesses starting up, because it's easier to start up. So it's kind of, is that what I do? I said, sure, why not, I'll give it a go. And it was nothing made like that, and it was it was good fun. I mean, I was on it for 3 years, and I got for a year, so I did kind of 2 full seasons of it. But I felt I was done then. I didn't really need to do a third one.
I've sat on boards as well as an investment guy, and had pitches come to me and everything like that. I'd love to know, what is it that you look for, or you looked for, when you see an up and coming founder or a new business, or what are the things, the key attributes of something that go, that's something I would invest in?
It really was on the ability of the individual to deliver, I would think. So it could be a great idea, but what's the resilience of the individual to deliver? Because particularly, I say on Dragons Den, it's a one-hit wonder. It's a one and done job. You've got one chance to get it right, and there's no really more capital behind you. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So, but how can you keep going? And startups are very hard. I mean, they're very hard, and you've got to be able to, there isn't a scientific kind of workbook that you do this and you will be successful. You go out and the thing doesn't work, and you have to change it. You've got to hold on. You're going to run out of cash. You've got to try and keep it going for as long as possible. So you're really looking at the individual, or if it's a couple, have they got the ability to cope with a bit of failure?
100%.
So if they're going to get put off at the first problem that comes up, they're probably not the right person.
It's funny because someone said to me the other day, because obviously doing the coaching and consulting stuff I'm doing now, he said, well, why would I want to go with you? I said, well, I've probably failed 1,000 times over the last 8 years. So I know all the paths not to go down to hopefully help you if anything goes wrong on my path. Yeah. So I think failure is probably one of the greatest gifts that you can actually get.
Yeah.
And I think you're right in terms of resilience, emotional intelligence, and everything like that, self-awareness in terms of market awareness can really help in terms of getting people in the right direction to be successful in terms of that as well.
And it is very stressful, even if you have raised money and and businesses, and you have to shut them down because you can't raise any more. But there's that period where you're hanging on, the cash is kind of ripping out of the business, and you're hoping something might come, or you might get a new order, something might happen, and sometimes it does. Sometimes you're hanging on by your fingertips, and then sometimes you just have to let go and say no. We gave a good shot, but it didn't work.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, there can be amazing people with amazingly great ideas, but if they can't implement that idea, and then obviously, because you're a great communicator, if they can't communicate that idea out to you, could be the greatest secret out there. And that's why I think it's so important to have, action and implementation and good communication all mixed in together to be able to achieve what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you see a business, I mean, when you're starting up, you have to be good with the numbers. You can't just be a one-trick pony. You can't just be this inspirational guy who does all this stuff, because you got to watch the cash coming in. You got to get the people to work for you. You got to do all these other things, and then at a point, as the business starts to be successful, then you can start to release a little bit and have your finance person, your marketing person, all that stuff come in. But at the beginning, you have to be you do everything.
Yeah, and you obviously vice or deputy chair of Superquinn, and then you've been chairman of various different boards. Is it easier being a chair of a board, or is there different type of leadership skills than compared to when you're in Superquinn?
Well, it's very different, I suppose. In Superquinn, you were the main owner of the business, and you had a very kind of strong culture, and people knew where you were, and you had this phrase came from America, which is the IOTFC rule.
What's that?
I own the company.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it was a rule that my father could invoke every now and again. So we'd have a board discussion, and if he was losing the argument, but he still wanted to do it anyway, it only happened a few times, he invoked the IOTFC rule. Well, we're doing it. I know you don't like it, but we're doing it anyway. So we said, well, you failed to convince us, but yeah, we'll do it because you said we'll do it, but you failed to convince us. Okay, but we're still doing it. Whereas different if you're on a board with shareholders who have 25% of the business, and you're chairing the board where the owners are pretty much sitting around the board, you can't really be saying, well, we're doing this because they pretty much own the business. So you've got to just you have to listen, and try and at least make sure that the arguments are fair and balanced, and if they want to go in a different direction you think is right, you kind of have to go with that, really.
Yeah. And with your, I mean, there's a lot of people, and I'm into this as well, there's a lot of people, and it's not necessarily right, by the way, who talk about how we need to move away from the old-fashioned army-like command and control type leadership into a more kind of, purpose-driven, inspire and trust. But in reality, how realistic is that in a business? Because you've obviously experienced it yourself. Do you still need to have a bit of command and control for certain people, and then maybe still have that purpose-driven kind of mission statement? How do you think that really can fit into the millennials and the Gen Zs that we have today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a combination of both. I think in an early stage business, if you've just raised £1 million to go and pursue this idea, you really have to stay on message. You can't be coming back in 2 months' time to check, see how you're getting on. You need to check next week, or how we're doing, or what's somebody doing. I think as the business gets bigger, then I think having a strong culture, and really believe a strong culture is really important, because then you don't have to explain people, because they know, oh, this is what this business is about, this is how it works, and they know what's likely to work, what's not likely to work, and you don't have to check in as often, because you're hopefully not in a stage where the business is going to go under next week. But yeah, so I mean, you do need a little bit of, you have to be able to, it's got to robustly question people, why are we doing this, because it's very easy to follow a path saying, oh, there's business there, that might be easier to go, and then you end up losing your effort and the focus becomes completely diverse. So there's no necessarily right or wrong answer, but I think it's probably a combination of two. You do need, sometimes you need to crack the whip and say, sorry, this got to stop. You've tried this now for 2 weeks, it's not working, or 2 months, and we're spending resources here, it's not working. Back to here, because people are trying something and they really believe it works, they want it to work, but at some point you have to abort.
No, I totally agree. And you obviously now are doing a lot of kind of philanthropy stuff, helping people on boards and everything like that. What lights you up the most in terms of your sense of purpose now as Eamonn Quinn at your age and where you are, and what have you got for the future, if that makes sense?
I think when you see a team performing well, I think, and you don't necessarily have to get involved, that should be success. So success should be almost not having to getting rid of yourself. So I think when you see a team where you're starting off and you're having to kind of pull a few strings, and then you see it starting to gel together, somebody else bringing that together, I think that's probably the most satisfying bit. I mean, I can see it in Celsius when we started first. The business was, I think it had 25 employees or whatever, so it was pretty hard. But now it's at 100, and you can see the kind of team developing. There's kind of good cultures developed about in terms of customer service, whereas originally it was just about getting the product. And I think we've yes, the product's important, but the product has to be important for the customer. So I think we really put a customer emphasis into the business, and you can see that's made a difference. So things happen without being told to do it. They're doing it now because they know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and Celsius is that. I remember you telling me before, it's a kind of a food safety measurement system where this can go into the chicken or whatever and check it's done properly. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a few things, but this concept of HACCP, which is basically you've got if you've got a temperature. I use the chicken example. So if you've got a raw chicken coming in a van, you've got to check that the chicken is it at the right temperature when it gets to you. So you've got to check the van, make sure it's below 4 degrees. How are you storing the chicken? Is you storing it at the right place? So you have to do those temperature checks. And if you're going to cook it, are you going to cook it to the right temperature so that you kill all the bugs? So it's got to be 74 degrees, something like that.
Yeah.
So it measures all of those and puts it into a digital file, as opposed to the old system, which was a clipboard and a piece of paper and manually checking this, writing it down twice a day. Whereas our system is live all the time, so every check can be measured. So basically, it's just digitizing an old paper system, but it's real time. So it's measuring it in real time and sending alerts if there's a problem, or your fridge is broken down, or the supplier's truck is broken down. It won't let you accept the delivery. So it's kind of guiding you through that process. So that's just in food. So whether it's a Centra, Super Value, or a Spar, or it could be a pharmacy warehouse somewhere. So it's protecting food and medicine.
Yeah. And in your business, I'm sure, both in Superquinn and maybe not so much now, but especially in Superquinn, I'm sure at times it got a little bit stressful, as we all do in business. How do you then and now manage your energy and manage your stress?
Yeah, I mean it can be difficult. I think you probably have to try and go to problem solving mode rather than not get too emotional. I mean, it can be. I can remember we had a strike back in early 2000s, I think, and that was very frustrating because it was a situation where a union had got actually strong unions are better than weak ones. So it was a weak union leadership who created an expectation of a pay rise that was completely unrealistic. And when they went back with the tail between the legs, they couldn't deliver it. Then you just thought, well, this is just a complete waste of time. You're killing everything that you've been trying to do as a business. But you just have to, I suppose, hold on. Look, we'll get over it. But it's going to take a time. You'd love it to be solved tomorrow, but sometimes it takes a week for these things to get sorted out. And really nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You just bite your lip. Yeah, you can go home, kick the dog or whatever, the cat, whatever it is. And
as a potential vet, I'm sure you won't kick the dog.
Metaphorically speaking. And yeah, so I mean, but it is annoying. There's very little you can do. But you at least have to try and think of the big picture, and but I'm not sure what training you have for that or how you do it. You just have to at least think through the thing logically and not get too emotional about it. Because that's not going to solve anything if you come out screaming and shouting.
Yeah, and I know now, obviously, although not retired, but still out of the main game as such, you love to travel. And I know you're a big exerciser and used to do triathlons and still a big swimmer and everything like that. And then photography is something that I've seen, which you're phenomenal at.
Oh, thank you.
How did you get into the photography?
I got into photography because my wife said we should buy a camera to take photographs of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of ours, I was going to New York and I got this list to go into B&H camera in New York and to buy this camera. I was told exactly, I thought it was a very expensive camera. I now know it wasn't a very expensive camera compared to what I buy now, but at the time it seemed expensive. And but this B&H camera shop is the biggest camera shop in the world as far as I know.
Wow.
And it's run by a Jewish team, so these people with ringlets and all that sort of stuff, and everybody there, it's just an incredible, everything about every single thing. And in those days you didn't get to hold any, you got to hold it, but you didn't get to bring it to the till. It was brought to the till for you through a sort of series of tunnels. You paid for the camera, and then you got you paid, and then you got your gear, and then you could walk out. But they close on Saturdays and they close on half days because the bus loads. And one day I was there, and there's all these buses pulled up, and everybody out straight to prayer or whatever, or service or whatever they're doing. So it's an amazing shop. Anybody should go and have a look at B&H camera for New York.
Yeah,
it's an amazing store. But yeah, so the camera sat there for a year. My wife never picked it up. I never picked it up because she said she was going to take pictures of the kids. And then after about a year, I said, "Jeez, I must take this. This is ridiculous. This camera sitting here for a year, paid all this money for it." So I took it, and we were going to some event, and the pictures were useless. Because I didn't know what the buttons meant. And what I discovered was the shutter speed was too slow, so they were all blurry. Some of them were kind of creative blurry, you know. It's like a third of a second or something. You could sort of make them. I thought, this might be a good camera. This is useless compared to what I had. So then I kind of looked into it a little bit, and then I started taking pictures of the kids' sports days and rugby. Someone's playing rugby, so I started taking pictures of rugby, and then the parents said, "Oh, they're great pictures. Send them on to me." So from there, then I started getting into landscapes, and so working with a guy called Peter Gordon, a famous landscaper in Dublin, who's now created a huge business around travel photography.
Right.
So does these trips. I just came back from Senja in Norway last year, which was incredible. I've been done a number of trips with him, so that's great. But even just around Hoth, to me, it's if I go for a walk with the camera, sometimes I don't even take a picture, but sometimes you're waiting for the weather, or you're looking at what's happening, and you go down to the cliffs or whatever, and it is that sort of zen time, if you should say.
Yeah.
You can sit there watching the weather coming in or the sunrise. You get the best light, just before sunrise. Once the sun comes up, it's kind of done, because pictures. I mean, people like to take pictures of sunrise, but actually it's just a white spot in the corner of your image. It's too bright. But you can get these beautiful skies just before sunrise.
I love that.
So from there, so I've done. I've been doing architecture for the last kind of year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a guy called Joel Tingler. He won the World Architecture Photography Awards a number of years ago, and he's been doing tutorials and looking at buildings and modern art and all that sort of stuff.
That's amazing. So, have you sold some of yours then?
No, I don't really sell them. It's really more for me. Although I've printed out stuff. Some people have asked me for prints, and
I've seen them. They are that good. I have to say, there's not many.
There's a lot better photographers out there than me. But there are some nice ones. I hope. I think if you're from an area, then it's kind of nice.
Yeah, well, I go running and walking with the dog up there every week. I've seen you there a few times as well. So they're stunning photos, absolutely stunning, which are on Facebook if you haven't had a look as well. And you've obviously now, I know you do, like me, you enjoy your travel as well. And I don't know whether you get time, because obviously you've got a lovely wife and kids and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know if you get time to read at all. But I'd love to know, in terms of books, is there any book, either for life or business, that really kind of impacted you in a positive way and you kind of implemented some of the knowings within the book?
Yeah, I mean, there was, well, I'd have to mention Crowning the Customer now by my father.
Okay, absolutely.
That's the plug, that's the free plug. But it's still in print, I think it was printed to 20. So when everyone in the business got it, they had to read that. The one, and we were in Search of Excellence, and there was lots of Peter Drucker books. And I actually got to meet Peter Drucker in California when I was with the Coca-Cola had this research group of retailers, and they would bring him, and we got to meet Peter Drucker. He was 90 something at the time, and he was phenomenal guy, just even to listen to the stories he had and the way he kind of thought about things was really interesting. But the book I find myself mentioning to people more so than ever is The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey.
Okay.
Have you heard of that one?
I haven't.
It's a tiny little book about that. Says it explains what delegation is.
Okay.
And it's a very simple idea, but it basically describes this guy who's overworked, and he's people come up to him and they tell him the problems they have, and he says, I'll come back to you now. And they all leave work at 5 o'clock, and he's there till about 7. What am I going to do about this? And Doug told me about this, and what am I going to do with that? And then the next day they came, what am I doing, boss? Oh, I need another day on that. And he's getting in earlier then. And so somebody says, no, what those people, when they come up to you and tell you have this problem, they basically have a monkey on their back, and the monkey is jumping from their back to your back. So when you see that monkey jumping, you've got to stop the monkey and put it back to where it belongs. So when Doug comes up to me and tells me, listen, boss, I have this problem, you say, no, tell me what to do. Come back to me tomorrow morning. You think about what we should do, and we'll have a chat about it. So he then is able to leave the office at 5 o'clock, and his employees are feeding their monkeys themselves, and he's dealing with it. So I mean that's the basic concept behind the book.
Good.
And when to spot a monkey coming at you, and how to push the monkey back, and empower your employees to think about the problem. Don't just say, boss, I have a problem, what am I going to do about it?
Love it.
Come up with, give me a solution. What do you think we should do? Might be the right one, but at least I want you to think about how we solve this.
I love that.
And so people say, I never heard about that book. And
I've never heard about it.
I think it's about is it 60 pages or something? I mean, it's very small, but I found myself explaining about delegation and using that analogy, the monkey on the back, so many times that it's a really good one, because even this generation sometimes don't get the whole delegation thing.
It's so true, isn't it? Because I think I've had so many people on the radio show that said the most important thing is delegation, so that you can focus on what you really enjoy doing and filter out anything that you don't enjoy doing, or anything that you value yourself more in terms of time. If like even cleaning the house, 15 euros an hour or whatever, why not give it to somebody else rather than yourself if you're charging 500 quid an hour? And I think people sometimes don't get that. They just go, I can do it myself. But actually, if you delegate and focus on the things that you really love doing, you'll have more energy for them, you'll probably get more done and more efficiency and all that stuff as well.
But also, you can see that it's very easy to have all these issues, and people say, what are we doing about this, what are we doing about that? And suddenly you have 25 things you have to make a decision on. So it is easier if you sometimes you have to obviously do it. I mean, these things aren't perfect, but it's better to go into a meeting where somebody's presenting their solution to a problem. At least you can query the question and say, well, I like what you're doing there, but I don't think that's going to work. Maybe we need to look at this, but you're empowering them and they have ownership. Yeah. Because if they haven't really thought about it and you just say, well, I think we should do this, and they go, that's not a good solution. He hasn't thought about this. He hasn't thought about that. It mightn't work as well. But some organizations, some are command and control, and I mean some of the big. I remember it was Marks and Spencer years ago, and I can't remember who the chairman was, but he wanted to give the impression he was in touch with the business, and he said, I demand to taste all the new soups and whatever's coming in, they have to come and give it to me, And so this is a guy in his 60s and more salt, No, I'm pretty sure that's a really bad decision. You should not be tasting the food as a spell in your 60s to appealing to somebody in their 20s,
Absolutely.
So there are definitely things you should not be making decisions yourself.
In terms of advice, and I know you help a lot of people in terms of advice, if you're speaking to either your younger self, 18-year-old self, or a young up-and-coming entrepreneur or business person today, what advice would you give them based on what you've experienced in life now?
I mean, it's so different now. Growing up in Dublin in the 80s, the only solution really, unless you had a job here, was you had to go. Whereas now, I mean, as we talked about, Celsius's business up in the whereas it's right in the middle of nowhere in Donegal, and they're servicing 50 different countries from that base.
Wow.
But you can start a business from your attic now, as they're saying with AI. So it's just a completely different world. I mean, the possibilities from Ireland now to set up business is just huge. So I suppose it's just be brave, have a go. As we talked about failure earlier on, have a go, and if it doesn't work, it's easier to fail when you're 20, 22 than when you're 45 with a mortgage and a house. So there's just so many opportunities now. It's incredible.
There is, especially with AI, as you say. It's kind of changing the face of the world, the business world as well. It's really interesting to see how that continues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting summaries of meetings now that on Zoom, and the summary of the meeting is coming.
Yeah.
Wow, did we discuss? Okay, that's a pretty good. That's a good summary. But you're just learning these new tools. I'm definitely behind the game. I have to up my game now in terms of getting to know about it.
And so you've still got a good way to go. You're in your third act now. As they say. Is there any plans for the future of business ventures or family ventures, or what's the plan for Eamonn going forward?
I've sort of been a little bit of a pause at the moment. I've just come to the end of my nearly 10 years with DCU. As the chairman of that for 5 years. I was on the board, and still involved in New Life, as an LED business, servicing supermarkets, and Kelsey is kind of growing. So I kind of think I'll probably stick with Celsius for the time being. So it's becoming quite a big business now, and it's spreading its feet, so it needs a little bit more time. And so I have all these kind of other interests with grandchildren now, so
absolutely
I have to go visit grandchildren, and into the gardening now as well, growing my own vegetables, all that sort of stuff. Doing a bit of photography, and a couple of other trips around the place. So sort of a variety. So not, as people say, you're tired. No, I don't like the word retirement. I said non-executive. So that's the goal, is to keep a number of things. And we have our own family foundation as well. So we just had a meeting yesterday. We're looking at some presentations to look at. I'm involved with McKelly and Grow It Yourself as well, which is trying to change the attitude of particularly young people. They have a school program, and kind of creating food empathy and kind of climate change and all that sort of stuff. Yes, it is interesting. So some of these problems are very hard to deal with. Like, how do you solve climate change? Even with no matter how much money you have, it's a difficult one, but it's probably just little pieces kind of nibbling away at it, isn't it?
Exactly. I think if we all take responsibility for our own change as such, it's amazing how the ripple effect then goes on around and everything. Yeah. And obviously a long way off, but if you're 94 years of age, on a stage in front of 10,000 people, beamed out on my podcast to 8 billion people around the world, and it was your legacy speech, and it can be anything, not to do with business, what kind of message would you like to leave with the world?
Wow. that's a pretty heavy one. I think you should. I think if it's more, I suppose, how you live your life. I think you should be at least happy with the decisions that you've made. I mean, we used to have describe a situation. If you made that decision and you had to go on the Late Show and explain what you did, would you be happy?
That's a good
so if in a business decision, okay. I don't think I'd be happy with that explanation. Maybe it's the right. Maybe from a business point of view, it's okay. But would I be happy with that explanation? No, I wouldn't. So I think you need to make decisions that you're happy. That if maybe when you get to this the gate at St. Peter's, said, tell me about this decision. Tell me what your thought process was there, buddy. And you go, oh, probably not one of my best ones. Yeah, probably that wasn't good. So I think you'd like to be able to think that you were proud of the decisions you made and you did them for the right reasons, and that you could stand over them. I think that's as much as anybody can kind of really ask for, unless you're in a position where you can really change the world.
I love that, and I think for me, it very much aligned to that. It's about treating others as you want to be treated as well, in terms of making sure there's no karma there, as I always call it as well. And I have to say, I've known you, as I said, since 2018, and every single time we've met, whether it be on HoFed or at the All Ireland Business Summit or on my radio show before and now on the podcast now, or when you've helped me in terms of a bit of a mentoring, you've been an absolute legend and so kind and humble considering how successful that you've been over your career. Yeah. And I just want to say from my heart to your heart, thank you so much. Sure. And thank you so much for coming on the show as well.
All the work that you do, Doug. And keep it going.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Eamonn Quinn on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories. I'll be back next week with another inspirational guest. In the meantime, if you need to get in touch, please contact me at doug@dougdeepwater.com. From all of us here and the team of the show, I wish you a truly inspirational week. I look forward to seeing you next time.